Welcome to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, the daily talk show with the voice of Penn State football and men's basketball. You never know what special guest may stop on by any given day. Now here's the man of the hour, Mr. Steve Jones.
Great to be with you.
Oh, yes.
And we will start with this. Yesterday in Iowa City, it was 71, 72 degrees.
That it was.
Incredible.
It was lovely.
Phenomenal. Then when we went to the bus to go to the arena, it was windy and about 54.
Dropped about 17 degrees, give or take.
Very windy, 54. Wind chill had to be in the low 40s. When the game was over, the wind chill was 6 below zero.
Yes.
And it was snowing.
Yes. I would never like to go back to the state of Iowa again.
My goodness gracious. It was... I walked past the manager and I said, now this is Iowa.
I
said, this is Iowa.
And I think cold would describe how Penn State shot the ball yesterday in general.
Well, we always talk about like the totality of a game. And that was the loss was the totality of a game. So let's start with what the issues were, especially in the first half of the game. The issues in the first half of the game, there is no question who is the engine of the team.
Mm-hmm.
And the engine of the team is Ace Baldwin.
Yeah.
And he has been bringing it. He's been playing 40 minutes a night, bringing it 40 minutes a night, bringing it 40 minutes a night. In the first half last night, with all due respect, he did not play with a lot of juice. I don't know, a couple things Iowa was doing may have thrown him off, but he didn't have a lot of juice. And they fall behind 17 because the engine doesn't have juice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't help that, we know Zach Hicks struggled shooting last night for the first time in a month. We know that, DeMarco Dunn didn't really get enough opportunities to shoot. They covered him up pretty well.
Jameel Brown also 0 for 4. Like, just the entire team was just cold from everywhere it felt.
So, you're sitting there, and you see that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the bottom line on how the game played out. To start, that's how you fall behind by 17 points.
Mm-hmm.
And as Dick and I talked about, one of the keys was to at least be in single digits to give yourself a shot in the second half. Well, they started playing better toward the latter stages of the first half, and they got the thing down to 8.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, they had it to 6, but they got it to 8 at halftime. Okay, there you go. So now you've done that. They start the second half on fire. And they get it to 251 to 49.
I believe Leo Boyle hit both of his threes. Like, he was cooking, and Ace was getting to the basket, and just all of a sudden it was like...
And Ace has juice. Ace is playing with juice at both ends of the floor. It made a big, big difference.
And I think, him and Zach Hicks in the first half didn't have a basket, and then they both had the first 2 of the second half, and then all of a sudden Ace goes crazy. And then you're like, oh my gosh, like, there's a comeback here.
So now all the game pressure is on the home team.
Mm-hmm.
You have a 17-point lead at home. It is now just about completely evaporated. It's 2. Penn State is a live ball turnover or a rebound and a score away from either tying it or taking the lead.
Mm-hmm.
Which, when you're making a comeback, you have to at some point get the lead.
Mm-hmm.
At some point. Where now, for the first time, the opposition has to come down and make a shot, which for a long period of time, they didn't have to make shots.
I was cold to start the second half.
Right. When they finished cold at the end of the game, they didn't score a basket the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and then, out of nowhere, now earlier in the game, Kip Kissinger teed up Mike. I have no idea what Mike did. I'll have to ask Mike privately.
Mm-hmm.
When I see him tomorrow, I'm not going to see him today. What he said or didn't say. Because Mike has gone the vast majority of his career with no tees. Zero. No tees.
Yeah.
He's been teed up more this season than his previous, all his other years combined. Rice, Randolph, Macon, VCU. He's had more this year. So he gets teed up. Don't know what he said. I know why he was upset.
Because Nick Kern was driving.
Nick Kern and got decked. Okay. And DJ Carsonson didn't see a foul. All right. At least DJ later came over and talked to Mike about what he did or didn't see. Okay. And the same thing with Brooks Wells was the same way. He made a call. You come over, you talk. The other guy won't do it.
Who, Kip?
Yep. Kip Kissinger won't do it. He yells. So he tees up Mike. All right. Game kind of changed in Penn State's favor after that, though. Well, now you start the second half. Let's do this in a couple ways. Dick and I, in all the games we've done, I don't care whether it's games he's covered for the Daily News, games with me, all the games I've broadcast, other games you just happen to be there when they're being played. Have never seen a game where at the first media timeout, the under 16, one team had 17 fouls and the other one had none.
Yep.
Ever. We're looking at each other like, I said, have you ever seen that before? He said, Dick says, I've never seen that before. I was about to ask you. I said, no.
I sat there and was just listening to you guys talk, and you were like, they're up to 4 fouls in 2 minutes?
Right.
That's not right.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, 6 and 3?
Yep.
7?
Yeah.
Just grew. It grew and grew.
But it wasn't the 7. It's the fact that the other guy had none. And my running joke has always been on stuff like that. He says, wow, it's incredible when you play pristine defense. Really? That's a joke. Okay. Well, Penn State gets this thing down to 2. Iowa's on its heels. Crowd's flat.
Ace had just made, I believe, he made a tough layup.
Really tough layup. And so he's backing up down the court. And all of a sudden, Kip Kissinger tees him. Well, Mike's in front of me, so I couldn't really, I could kind of see Ace was to the left. And I could see Ace. And all of a sudden, he's got this look on his face like, what did I do? Right? And he teed him up.
He did.
And you saw it.
It did.
So tell us what you saw.
I'm sitting there. Ace makes this basket, wheels back down, and is talking to the bench.
This is, by the way, when you weren't conversing with Miss Iowa.
Of course. Ace wheeling back down the court after making a tough layup. He's talking to the bench, having fun. He gets back on defense, looks at a player for Iowa. I think it was Harding. I forget who, whatever guard it was for them. It wasn't Perkins. I think it was Harding.
That would be Brock Harding.
It was Brock Harding. And he's looking at him, looks over at the ref, is like eyes back and forth on everyone, and then looks at coach because straight ahead of Ace is the player. All the way to his right, about, I would say, 75 degrees to his right is the ref. About 45 degrees is Coach Rhodes, and I'm about 30 degrees. So I'm looking right at Ace, watching this happen. I see his eye line then dart to Rhodes, and he's talking to him. No idea what he was saying. My presumption is something about, like, we're back in this, or defense, or a play, or whatever. He's saying something to coach. Right. And then all of a sudden the tee comes, and then Ace looks at the ref and just says, I'm like, points and looks like I'm literally talking to my coach.
Right.
What am I getting teed up for? And then after the game, I guess coach said he got teed up for talking to the opposing player. And it was like, no. He wasn't looking at him. He wasn't talking to him. He was talking to his coach.
Right.
I don't know where you got that from. And it wasn't like you couldn't see his eyes. Like, his eyes very clearly were not looking at the player.
Right.
If the Iowa player had driven, probably would have gotten by Ace.
Right.
But he very much so was not paying attention to whoever was in front of him. And he gets teed up.
It changes the whole game. Okay? It changes the entire game. Because at that point, Iowa is struggling to score. They're on their heels. Now they get 2 free throws, and I pointed out going into the game, Sanford had been scorching hot at the free throw line. He hit 19 of his last 20.
Mm-hmm. And what did he do last night?
Right. And I don't know.
18 of 19.
18 of 19, yeah.
Not half bad.
Right. I mean, it's the first time I've ever seen a guy get 26 points and be 3 of 11 from the field.
He got a double-double in the first half and didn't have a basket.
Right. And I did talk to him after the game, right? And I said, we were kind of kidding on the air. I said, we've never seen a line like that before. And he goes, that was kind of crazy, Mr. Jones. I said, all right. But they then get the ball to go with it. Now, they already had the ball anyway, okay? So it wasn't like it was
just 2 free points.
But you get 2 points plus the ball. Now they score there. Now it's 6. You're back to a working margin again.
Mm-hmm.
He changed the game. This is what I talk about over and over again about every sport. I don't care if you are a coach, you are a player, you're an official, or you are a broadcaster. Okay? The best ones are the ones that have a feel for the game. It's something you can't point out. It's something that's in the air. It's like the wind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's like the wind. You can't see it, but you can feel it. And the ones that don't have a feel for the game stick out like a sore thumb. People broadcasting games don't have a feel for it. You can tell right away they have no feel for the whole thing. They're just mechanically going about the job, mechanically doing the job.
Mm-hmm.
Coaching, mechanically doing the job, right? Players, mechanically doing the job, or trying to.
Mm-hmm.
And officials, mechanically. The best ones, there's a reason they're the best. They've got a feel for the game, a feel for the moment, a feel for what's going on, a feel to pull a player aside and say, hey, look, just cool it down. And say, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Somebody else might give you a T. I'm not going to. Just make sure, okay? Don't hurt your team here.
Mm-hmm. It did that in the second half with Puff.
Right.
Like, Puff was pretty close to getting a T, and they said, hey,
was.
Chill.
Right. But that was Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
Brooks Wells. Well, Brooks has. I know fans have the people that there aren't their favorites, and some people. I like Brooks to the point where, no offense, I talked to Terry Weimer in the offseason, who's the officiating. And, Terry and I have at least seen each other a lot over the years. Well, I was talking to him, and he, and it's great. He says, to be honest with you, he says, we hear what goes on out there. He says, when you guys say something, he says, you're fair about it, right? He said, that's what we've always liked about you guys. At least you're fair about it. Like, in other words, you may say, but you're not personal about it. You don't tear into somebody. You don't belabor it, right? He said, because he said, we'll make mistakes. He said, and do you point it out? Sure, but then you move on. Right?
Yeah.
And you don't make it personal. He says some people make it personal and belabor it the entire time. And I was telling Terry, I said, hey, by the way, as a young official, I said, I really like. I said, like all of us, not perfect. I said, but I said, Brooks Wells. He says, I'm noting that. He says, we like him a lot too. He said, Terry, he said, young guy coming up. I said, you need as many young guys coming up as possible that can do the job he does.
He was good last night. He made good calls.
He's fine.
He was,
DJ was a little bit up and down. That's okay, whatever. But this is wrong, right? This is wrong, what happened there.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? Right? Don't insert yourself in the game for no apparent reason. Okay, this is not a heated pushing and shoving and people throwing it. This is not Texas Tech, Texas.
Yeah.
Okay? What incidents were there last night? None. There's no need for you to do anything. Even Fran McCaffrey was like, because you saw Dick and I were talking to Fran after the game. Fran was like, I didn't get that one at all.
It wasn't even like, it wasn't like Ace was gesturing. It wasn't like he was shouting at the player or like running back and like talking to him in his ear, getting close. No, he was talking in the direction of coach. We don't know what he was saying.
Right.
But
Mike said it was no big deal. I mean, right.
It couldn't have been that crazy if he's talking to his coach and like he's shouting to him because he has to, because he's like on the other side of the court and trying to
something as simple as like, hey, he says, keep going to me. I can beat this guy. What's the problem with that? He's telling his coach strategically what he wants to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like, holy mackerel.
And it wasn't like it didn't take long to pull the T either.
No.
Like it came, they got back on defense and within 2 seconds, immediately a technical. It wasn't like he gave him grace period or like said, hey, knock it off, I will tee you. No. Just immediately bam, T. And Ace is like, huh? Everyone just stopped. It was like, what happened? Like,
now again, in the guise of fairness, does Ace occasionally on the floor kind of push the envelope a little bit? Yeah, he does. He does. I felt he's been close a couple of other times.
He's gotten a few as well. Yeah.
Right. I think he's got
one or two.
Two, I think.
Yeah.
Right. But he's kind of pushed it a little bit. All right. But not last night. He wasn't right. And this is one of those no feel for the game, no feel for the moment. What are you doing? Why are you inserting yourself into the game? Okay? If you need to talk to a player during a timeout just to make sure, right, do it then. Now, I'm not saying we don't know what would happen if it's never called. For all we know, Iowa comes down and hits a three. For all we know, Iowa then goes on a little run. For all we know, Penn State commits a foul and they get a couple of free throws. Whatever. We don't know what the result's going to be. Okay? But that was the moment in the game where you felt like the game changed. And it was it's one of those where you sit back, go, I don't understand what you're doing and why you're doing it.
I would love to hear from Ace, like what he was saying. I really would, because like,
oh, that's okay. I'll just ask him to practice.
Yeah, but even so, like Ace, yeah, you said Ace pushes it a little bit, but like at that moment, he is feeling himself. He's feeling good. He's not going to go out there and say something ridiculous. Yeah. He's not a stupid person. He's not stupid. He's smart. He's real good. Like he's talking to his coach because he just made one of the toughest shots pretty much all night. Like it was like a running floater to his right. Looked like he got fouled, made it, felt good, was flexing the bench, was just all these things. And just immediately tech comes. Wasn't like it was a long wait, immediately comes. And then the fact that both Coach Rhodes and Ace were like, well, huh? And everyone in Iowa, like everyone around us was like, I don't know what.
Have I ever seen a technical where, okay, and I think I talked to you, I think you heard me talk to Dick about this after the game. Bruce Parkhill's coaching a game on Hawk Hill. They're playing St. Joseph's. Penn State is controlling the entire game. Right? Now, Penn State ends up winning the game, and they win the game by a controllable margin. So this technical foul has nothing to do with the game, but it has to do with feel for the game. Penn State's coming down. They've got like an 8-point lead in the game, and the two guards messed something up. And, you know, I'm courtside there. And right? And Bruce yells out, will you guys get your heads in the game? He may have thrown an extra word in there. Right? And he got teed. Right? And he looks over the officials. What's that for? He says, you can't talk to us like that. He said, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to them. He said, they screwed the play up. He went, and the official's like, you can't take it back. And he's like, right? See, again, you know how I talk about numbers all the time, numbers. And people who are really into the numbers hate when I talk about feel for the game, but I'm sorry, it's a reality. Some people have an instinct for it. Remember the game on Saturday, and I've said this about Michigan too, in basketball, where Juwan Howard will just call a timeout, and Dick and I will look at each other like, what are we doing here? Why are you calling timeout now? And Mike Woodson does that. You're like, okay. Take a breath. That's what I mean about feel for the guy. Like they'll like, like it doesn't make sense in the moment.
And
right?
If I may, like referees in basketball, I presume have to at least be fans of the game. Like if you're doing this, you've got to like enjoy the game and understand it to an extent where like if it's your full-time job, you've got to know the game. Oh, and you've got to understand that. You got to know the feel. All these things.
But everybody. But can I say?
Yeah.
Interject for a moment. Mm-hmm. Remember, like anybody else, okay? Mm-hmm. They're all different. Mm-hmm. Okay? So not all broadcasters are bang, 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 bang. Mm-hmm. Some are just mechanics. Some have a great feel for the game, the moment, the whole thing. You know, Dan Schulman has a great feel for the moment, the game. Mike Breen, right? You know, that's why I'm sticking with the basketball guys right now, right? You know, great feel for the moment, the game, things like that. And others are just, and you can hear it during championship week, and you can hear it during bowl season. Bang, ding, ding, ding. Well, officials are the same way. Some just do it because it's a great job, and they're like ding, ding, ding. And others have like, well, let me just see. Let me just see. This is how you handle it. This is, right? Let's set a tone early in the game as to what we're doing here, what we're not doing. We're going to be consistent. All right? Heated moment. All right? Go over, talk to the coach. Okay? I'm not going to give anybody free points out of this. Let's just, you and I just talk. Right? Let me hear you out. You hear me out. And then we'll do the best we can to move on. That didn't happen last night. Now, it happened with Brooks and DJ. They both handled it that way. This guy didn't.
Kip just fired. He fired from the hip.
Yep.
And like that moment was one where if you've watched or been a part of enough basketball games, like I've watched a lot of games. Do I think I'm an expert? No. By no means do I think I'm an expert.
No, but I've seen enough the game
to understand at that moment all the momentum is swinging. This player, this team, they're feeling really good. Unless he says something wildly egregious to a point where it is a technical foul worthy, where it's like he's saying things that you shouldn't say to anybody.
Yep.
That point, you give him a tech.
Yeah.
Or if he's talking to the player and like flexing at him or doing one of those like things where it's like a problem. And the NBA is now getting a lot more loose with those, where like stare downs or techs, whatever. Even something like that, I could at least understand a little bit.
Yep.
If it's something like that happens, that's one thing.
Right.
But if it is just a player saying something to his coach or saying something in general, or in the case of Park Hill, shouting something like that, you have to like understand, like, okay, he could be saying it to a couple different people here.
Right.
He could be saying it to the players who just messed up a play.
Yeah.
And he's saying, get your heads in the game. Or he could be saying it to us for something that his players did. Hypothetically, at that point,
it's not like I have never had a coach look at me and say something to me about what was going on the floor, including sitting next to the Kentucky bench one time when Penn State was the second game of a doubleheader, and Rick Pitino looking at me and saying stuff like, oh, yeah, I hear you. It's like, I'm with you.
And that's a moment where you say, like, the only possible person he could be saying it to is his players.
Right.
His players just messed up, and he's telling them to get their heads in the game. He's not telling you to get your head in the game because you didn't do anything the last 30 seconds. So you didn't have to. It's infuriating when a game gets decided to an extent.
Once again, let's preface all this. It doesn't mean Penn State's going to win the game. It doesn't mean that Penn State doesn't, because it's a night where Zach Hicks isn't shooting well. It's a night where DeMarco Dunn isn't quite, in gear on a couple of things. All right. It doesn't mean Penn State wins it. Okay? It doesn't. But I would like to have seen how it would have played out
had it not happened.
Had it not, because when you're trying to ascend the ladder and going rung by rung in a game, you have to get the lead at some point to then go, okay, we've ascended the mountain, we've cleared the summit. Okay? Now let's play it out. And the other team now has the pressure where they have to now, for the first time since the 22-second mark, suddenly have to now come up with a play, make a shot. Yeah. Well, at that point, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen in the game. And I would have liked to have seen what might have happened. It could have been the exact same result and the exact same score, but I would have liked to have seen how it would have played out had that not been called. That was one of those like moments where like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. That changes the whole game.
It deflated the entire Penn State team and inflated the entire Iowa team. At that point, I don't believe Sanford had made a shot. He'd got 10 points already from free throws. He had not made a shot and had a double-double. Dix...
It's the most bizarre triple-double I've ever
wild.
seen.
And then I believe Dix had 18 points in the first half. He had 2 in the second half.
Yeah.
So, but at that point, Sanford, their best shooter, best scorer, is ice cold.
Yep.
He can't make anything that's not from the charity stripe. That is just his only place of scoring for the night. They're making threes for whatever reason. They're actually making their three-pointers in this game, which was a different thing.
Well,
but
I'm glad you brought that up. Go ahead.
But at that point, their shooters are ice cold. Penn State's getting hot. You have to presume at some point Iowa's going to get back into it because they do have scorers and they do run the score up. They had 47 in the first half and they ended the game with 90. Like they were going to crack 80 points. We all knew it was going to happen.
Yep.
But at that point, the guy who should be scoring hasn't scored well. And you think, oh, this is really interesting. And it would have made a really interesting game. And I bet you it would have been like a 2-point game pretty much the rest of the way. Where Penn State would have gotten a lead, Iowa would have got it back, and then it would have been a back and forth thing. And because, again, you've mentioned a lot, like when your offense is playing well, your defense can relax a little bit and you can play well. Yep. If your defense is playing well, it makes your offense a little better. Yep. But if your defense is playing well and your offense isn't, it doesn't help you at all. It doesn't do anything for you. Right. And last night, Iowa's defense played really well, and their offense, for whatever reason, like their main guy couldn't make a shot.
But he's been slumping. He had been 3 of his last 14 in threes coming into the game. I mean, and his overall numbers were like, he didn't shoot the ball well last night. He was 3 of 11.
Yeah. And you presume at some point.
And I think it's when he missed his 5th 3-point shot, I said, Dick, he's doing Penn State a favor right now every time he shoots it. Again, we do not know how it plays out. The final may have been 90-81 anyway. We don't know. Okay? We don't know. But I would have liked to have found out what would have happened. Because last night's game was Indiana in reverse. Indiana couldn't hit 3-point shots. Indiana was doing everything inside. Indiana had 5 more baskets than Penn State. Penn State won the game by 9. I think Penn State had 7 more baskets.
32-25.
7 more baskets last night than Iowa.
7 more baskets and 18 more shots, by the way.
And lost by 9 points because, again, they only hit, maybe 5 threes?
Penn State hit 4 threes. 4 threes. Iowa hit 8.
Right.
And then Iowa went 32 of 37 from the line. Penn State went 13 for 23 from the line.
Right. So 32, you said they hit 8.
They hit 19. They had 19 extra points.
So they had 57 points from the 2 lines. Penn State buried Indiana at the 2 lines. Right? They beat Illinois at the 2 lines. Last night, Penn State got buried from the 2 lines. Their damage was all inside, which is what Iowa was trying to do. They were trying to get Penn State to be an inside team. Which is great strategy on their part, and they played it well, and they were smart about it.
And even so, Q played well. Q had a good game offensively, 18 points. Didn't do well from the free throw line, but in terms of like just scoring the ball, not bad. It's just a weird game, Steve. It was a weird game. Ray Q came off the bench, 16 points. That was something.
Yeah, no, Ray Q helped. Ray Q helped. I mean, and I give them a lot of credit.
It was a weird game, weird time for a game to happen in Central Time Zone, weird weather.
Weird. Now they got Minnesota. Minnesota plays Illinois tonight in Champaign. Lost at Nebraska, but that was more of a reflection to me of not Minnesota. That was more of a reflection of Nebraska. They, after watching them live and seeing Penn State score 49 points. I mean, Penn State lost last night, scored 81. Okay? Well, they played Nebraska, scored 49. I think that's a combination of 4th road game, 6 games, and Nebraska plays really good team defense. They really do. Well, they did the same thing to Minnesota. They really clamped them down. They clamped Christie down. They clamped Payne down. I think Garcia was, but that was more of a reflection of Nebraska. Now, Minnesota will score tonight. Okay? Because for Illinois, for the most part, they play defense because the rules state that you have to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Illinois will score better than 80 tonight because that's what they do. They score. Iowa, same thing. They score. I mean, Penn State outshot them from the field last night. Out-rebounded them the whole thing. Had more made baskets, blah, 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 blah. Guess what? We talk about the power of the three. You've got to make some. Right? And don't get – and I always love this. Well, they're just they live by it, they die by it. Understand the modern game. You have to make some. I didn't say you had to make 20. I didn't say you had to make 15, but you have to make some. Okay, you can't lose the two lines in today's game. You can't lose the free throw line in combination with the three-point line. Penn State, when they've been winning games, wins both because it doesn't matter then how many. Like if you're in the neighborhood in terms of number of baskets made, the point value of the three changes the dynamic. Penn State had 5 fewer baskets than Indiana. Won the game by 9. Oh, and by the way, remember, Indiana hit a shot at the buzzer to make it from 12 to 9.
And that's what Penn State did exactly the exact same thing last night.
Same thing last night.
Banked in a 3.
You banked in a 3 and made it a 9-point game. Right? But that's the power of the shot. Now, I'm not saying you take 30 of them. Not even saying you take 20 of them. But you've got to be able to make. Penn State is a team that needs to make usually between 7 and 12. Right in that range, that puts them right in the ball game because of the point value. All right. I didn't say they had to make 20, 15. The school record's 18. Okay. But between 7 and 12, depending on how the game's playing out and the pace of the game. All right. Well, if you're making 20-something baskets in the game, I'm talking about 1 out of every 3 or 4 baskets you hit, like 1 out of every 3.5, should probably be a 3.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what winning teams do. Teams don't win games usually 2 by 2 anymore. Hey, you don't win games usually 2 by 2. You have to have some mixture of threes in there. That's why when I'll have people like, well, they live by the 3 and die by the 3. I'll just stand there and go, okay.
There are some teams that do that, but those teams are far and few between.
Well, but the reason is that based on personnel, that's all they have.
Yeah.
Okay. Based on personnel, that's all they have.
Take the Houston Rockets from, 2018?
Yeah.
They lived and died by the 3. That is literally how it worked for them, and that is why they lost in the playoffs, because they went like 0 for 29 or whatever that crazy number was.
Right.
Like that's a live and die by the 3.
Right.
But the Golden State Warriors don't live and die by the 3.
Because that is their MO. I mean, this is we feel this is the best way to win. That's why they do it. Right? It takes a lot to win games 2 by 2 these days. The vast majority of baskets you're going to get are going to be 2s. And one of the keys defensively is I want to make you take as many tough 2s as possible. I want you to take the shots I want you to take. So I want you to take the 17 to 20 foot 2. Right? I want you taking that shot. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's what's that's today's game.
Yeah. Like, for example, the team that generally lives and dies by the 2 and goes 2 by 2 is Indiana, as you talked about.
Right.
They don't shoot a lot of threes.
Right.
Last night against Wisconsin, they went 6 for 14. 42%. They made 6.
And it made a big difference. They won by 4.
And they won by 4, even though in Wisconsin went 8 for 26.
Right.
Not great. And that was a game where you can live and die by the 2 because you don't have to shoot threes. Because if you're Indiana, your game is just like, we need to just hit as many 2s as possible. Kalel Ware had 11 for 12 from the field, 27 points. He had a double-double.
Yep.
They had 20 at half, I think. Like, that's a team where, yeah, they don't need a 3-ball, and they don't shoot 3-ball, but you need to make some, and they made some.
Let me put it this way. If Indiana makes, in that game, what did you say they made 6?
They made 6 for 14.
Okay. All right. What if they make 4?
They lose.
By 2.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's... Right? or those two shots end up being twos instead of threes.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a 2-point game. What if Wisconsin has the ball at the end?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of a 2-possession game, it's a 1-possession game. See, that's like, that's why you sit back and go, okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's, oh well. The ACC
Oh, boy. My favorite conference in the world, Steve.
has filed a brief in a North Carolina court in opposition to Florida State's motion to dismiss or stay its case.
Mm-hmm.
It is the latest legal filing before a scheduled hearing, which is March 22nd, where both parties, according to Andrea Adelson of ESPN, they will make their case in front of a judge. The ACC outlined why the case should play out in North Carolina instead of Florida. I wonder why. Reiterating it is the appropriate venue for a dispute over a North Carolina contract to be decided. All right. The ACC filed suit against the Florida State Board of Trustees December 21st, seeking declaratory judgment in defense of the grant of rights. One day before, the Florida State Board filed its lawsuit against the ACC and challenged the grant of rights and the $130 million withdrawal fee.
They're trying. They're trying to get out.
The question is, and everybody may want him or nobody may want him. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I presume if anyone wants them, it'd be the SEC. Is that weird?
Well, you already have Florida. Why do you need them?
True.
You have Florida. Do I need Florida State? Now, they are one of the 18 schools that make up 50% of the TV rating. Penn State's one of them, too, as well. Florida State is one of them. Florida State and Clemson are the two in the ACC. They're in that grouping.
Mm-hmm.
The Big Ten has 7. The SEC has 8.
Mm-hmm.
The others are Clemson, Florida State, Notre Dame. To make up the 18, they make up 50% of the total TV viewership in college football. So they've got that working for them. But at the same time, do I want a group that has signed the grant of rights twice and is doing everything they can to get out of it?
Yeah.
Like, do I trust that group?
No. Not even slightly.
In addition, the ACC has argued that the North Carolina court should not defer to the Florida court, as Florida State has asked, because FSU has not met its burden to show substantial injustice. Again, this is a big issue to me, is that it's one thing if you signed the grant of rights way back when, which they did. But the problem was when they came up and they wanted to form the ACC network, and they changed the contract with ESPN to extend out to 2036 so the ESPN could then produce the ACC network. You signed it again. You signed it twice. That's a problem. I'm not a lawyer. Many people feel I need one.
I'm surprised you aren't a lawyer, Steve.
Many people need one.
Yeah.
Think I need one over and over again. But when you start having stuff play out in courts all the time, it's like, I mean, here are the college football headlines. Motion filed to suppress all evidence in ISU case. ACC files brief opposed to FSU motion. Let's see. Then Lance Leopold gets significant raise at Kansas. Okay. I mean, these are the headlines. What are the college basketball headlines? Anything any good? Texas marred by brawl.
After the
Texas
Tech fans.
Okay, Wisconsin IU delayed fire alarm.
Yeah.
Coaches on court storming. Let's get rid of it. Filipowski sore after court storming. All right. Oh, now we got basketball. Davis. Smith Center record 42. Houston claims number one. And what's the other one? Oh, BYU. BYU, you want to talk about like
going into...
no, they flat out don't get it. Okay, BYU flat out does not get it.
What do they not get, Steve?
Okay. I know you're new to the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
You're not supposed to go into Fog Allen Fieldhouse and beat Kansas. You're not supposed to. You talk about a girl like, oh, really? We're not supposed to do this? Okay. 19-game home court winning streak. Gone.
Was it 82 games in a row?
Every time Kansas starts to get a little traction this season, they fall back. Their season has been flat out strange. Because remember, at the beginning of the year, I think they were ranked number 1.
They were. And this season has just been weird in general for college basketball. Is that crazy of me to think? Like
82-game home court winning streak when leading at halftime. 67-game home court winning streak against unranked teams. Once again, the Cougars of BYU, new to the league, don't understand the rules. You're not supposed to do that.
Well, let's just quickly go through these teams. I want to discuss this part, the weirdness of this college basketball season.
Can I give you one weird fact?
Go for it.
Over the last 5 years, ranked teams on the road have a 68% winning percentage. Until this year, it's 44%.
Whew. Oh, boy. Like, you've got the big three of Houston, Purdue, UConn.
And then I think those are the 3 ones. There is a major separation between those 3 and who the fourth number 1 is.
Yes.
That's my opinion.
It's those 3, and then sitting on 21-6 as a record. You've got 8 different teams. You have 8. You have Tennessee, Marquette, Arizona, Kansas, Iowa State, North Carolina, Duke, and Auburn. All of them have the exact same record. That's absurd.
I know.
And none of them are better than the other ones. They all kind of beat each other, and then they all of a sudden just have these weird losses.
Well, this is where the transfer portal has come into play because a lot of people, number one, we've always talked about for Penn State how important we felt as a program to stay older if possible. It doesn't mean you can't have a mix of like 3 freshmen on a team and they're working their way up through the ranks. You know, when I mean older, like a decent amount of seniors, a decent amount of juniors. You know, a balanced roster makes you older. Okay, when you're bottom heavy and it's a lot of freshmen and sophomores, that's a problem. Okay, but you know, and you don't want to be too top heavy because you want some people to come up through the ranks. That creates culture along the way. So we've talked about Penn State being an older team. Well, because of the transfer portal and because of COVID years, the entire sport is older right now. And that's why you're seeing a reflection in this. Between the transfer portal and the COVID years, you have an older product. And a lot of players with NIL saying, I don't need to go to the NBA. I can just stay here and make a living because it's going to be a roll of the dice of trying to make it to the next level anyway. You know, and you don't know, like Tennessee, Dalton Knecht goes from northern Colorado to Tennessee. Did anybody expect him to have the year he's having?
Nope.
No, I thought he'd be a good player for him. Probably averaged, 12, 14 points a game. I didn't think he's going to average 21.
Ridiculous.
Nobody did. I don't even think he did.
No. And then outside of them, you've got Creighton, who's had a weird year. Illinois, of course, had a funky year. All the Shannon Jr. stuff is hanging over them. Alabama, Baylor, Kentucky, who just wins games. Way too close of games at the buzzer.
But lost 3 in a row at home for the first time ever.
Which, again, makes no sense.
That's why I think so you have a Big 12 team, a Big 10 team, and a Big East team in the top 3 spots. Whomever wins a conference tournament, SEC, Pac-12, even Big 12. Say Kansas wins the Big 12 tournament. Houston doesn't. Houston will still be a 1. I think that's where the 4th 1 seed is going to come from a conference tournament champion. That doesn't mean they're advancing anywhere in the tournament because, one thing about winning the conference tournament championship, man, that takes a lot of energy to do to win at minimum 3 games in 3 days. If you're somebody that's been able to get through the buys and everything like that, you're going to win 3 games in 3 days. Not easy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a conference tournament champion is going to determine who the fourth one seed is.
But even so, I don't trust any of those teams to win their conference tournament. A lot of the time you do. A lot of the time you say, I trust, like in this case, UConn. I trust them to get through it. Creighton could throw a wrench in that and beat them and come out of nowhere and destroy them. Or you could have a game where, like we saw, let's say it's the Big Ten. Purdue's lost. Well, imagine Purdue gets knocked out early. Then all of a sudden, Illinois is in the final against the Penn State, and they lose. Like, it could conceivably happen this year. We see some really weird results in these tournaments that bring a lot of extra teams in that probably shouldn't be there just based on record alone. But they get hot at the right time. And a lot of teams, like, for me, of course, UConn, Kemba Walker, they got red hot.
Yeah, they won
in
5
the tournament.
games
They won
in 5 days.
5 games, 5 days. All of a sudden, make the tournament as a low seed, and then steamroll through and just beat everyone and get there.
I know, because
Like,
Penn State was in their bracket.
Mhm.
If Penn State had been able to get out of Tucson, they were going to play UConn in San Diego.
I wouldn't have wanted to play UConn that year because they made free
Wouldn't
throws.
have bothered me. It would have been a Sweet 16 game. Roll the dice. Let's see what happens.
But the point is, like, the idea that anything could happen in the Big Ten, in the NCAA tournament, anything could happen in these tournaments. I like the ACC currently, of course, North Carolina and Duke are the top 2. I think there's a strong case neither of them wins the tournament. I really do.
Well, I think because
Like, it's just a funky year.
again, older. Everybody's older. Who's the young team out there? There's no young team out there, right? Teams are older because of the transfer portal and because of the COVID years, right? So everybody's, you have a lot of players getting that extra year and taking it. They're transferring someplace and taking advantage of it. And that's changed the dynamics of the sport across the board, where now almost anybody can beat anybody in a given night. Miami was in the Final Four last year. They have lost 7 games in a row. They've lost 7 games in a row.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to. I'd like to pull John Ruiz aside and ask him. He said, in NIL, between your football and basketball programs, do you feel like you're getting, quote, bang for your buck?
Yeah.
I would just like to. He may look at me and go, yeah, I'm fine. We're going to be fine. It's a long-term investment. He may say that. But short-term, Miami football, last year they got to the Final Four. This year, Nigel Pack is still with them on the second year of his 2-year deal. Right? Lost 7 in a row.
Not great, Steve. Not great. You know what is great? We'll be back tomorrow on the show yet again.
Thank you for listening to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, a 7 Mountain Media production. Come back at 11 every weekday for analysis of the latest happening in the sports landscape. From college football to European soccer, Steve and Kyle cover it all on Sports Talk with Steve Jones.